Do you recognize the name Sisyphus? Remember Sisyphus from Greek mythology? Love the story of Sisyphus. Sisyphus was handed down a punishment by Zeus, the almighty Zeus, and Sisyphus's eternal task was to push a stone to the very, very top of a hill, and every time he'd push it to the very top of the hill, what would happen? It would roll back to the bottom, and he would have to begin again, and he was basically condemned to do this in the underworld for eternity. And New Year's resolutions can feel a lot like the curse of Sisyphus. You get started, you push that thing up to the top of the hill, and by the end of the year, actually, do you know there's a day called Quitter's Day? It's coming in 5 days. It's the second Friday of the month of January, and Quitter's Day is the day when most people give up on those New Year's resolutions. So like Sisyphus, we intend to get to the top, but maybe we just begin again next year. More important than diets, more important than reading goals, the turning of the new year is a great time to reflect on the kind of person you are becoming. Being the right kind of person is so much more important than the number of books you read or how many countries you visit. Being the right kind of person. What if we paused? What if you paused and prayerfully reflected on the quality of person that you want to become this year? What would happen if we carefully reflected on the quality of person that we want to become? Perhaps we'd find some clarity for improving relationships. Perhaps we'd find focus for more satisfying work. Perhaps we would inadvertently find more personal satisfaction as well that would come out of carefully thinking about who it is that we are becoming. I had every intention of preaching on Romans chapter 8 this week. Julie can attest to that. But midweek, as I was studying, I've been studying the book of Hosea in my private time with the Lord. And as I came to Hosea chapter 4, verse 1, it really struck a chord with me as I thought about this new year. And I thought this was an appropriate place to camp out for today, this being the beginning of a new year. So our text for this morning is Hosea chapter 4. If you have a Bible, let me encourage you to open to Hosea chapter 4. We're going to look at the first 3 verses. Our focus eventually will be on just a portion of the first verse, but for now, we're going to expand our focus to verses 1 through 3 of Hosea chapter 4. These verses in the book of Hosea function like a prologue to an indictment against Israel for not being the right kind of people. As we're going to see in our text, disregard for godly character has catastrophic results, catastrophic effects on everyone and everything. Let me say that again. Failure to be the kind of people that God created them to be, speaking of Israel, had catastrophic effects on everyone and everything. Embedded within these 3 verses is an invitation to reflect on the kind of life that makes the world a better place for everyone and everything. Essentially, here's the message. You can see it on the screen. Godliness will change your life in our world. So again, Hosea chapter 4. I'm going to begin by reading the 3 verses in their entirety. Then we're going to go back and we're going to walk through those verses together. And then finally, before we close, we're going to take a closer look at 3 qualities of godliness. Let me begin by reading the text in its entirety. Hosea chapter 4, beginning in verse 1, and you'll see the text on the screen. Although that might be kind of small, you can also find it in your bulletin or in your Bible as well. Hear the word of the Lord, O children of Israel. For the Lord has a controversy with the inhabitants of the land. There is no faithfulness or steadfast love, and no knowledge of God in the land. There is swearing, lying, murder, stealing, and committing adultery. They break all bounds, and bloodshed follows bloodshed. Therefore, the land mourns, and all who dwell in it languish. And also the beasts of the field and the birds of the air, and even the fish of the sea are taken away. As a reminder, Hosea, you might remember Hosea, you might know something about the history of Hosea, but just by way of reminder, Hosea served as a prophet of God among the inhabitants of the northern kingdom of Israel. Way back, do you remember the first three kings of Israel? United monarchy of Israel. Who was the first king? Saul, and then David, and then Solomon. And after the reign of Solomon, remember his son Rehoboam was kind of an idiot, and because of his failure to lead well, the kingdom was divided into two parts: Rehoboam in the south, Jeroboam in the north. So beginning probably about 200 years after the United Monarchy, after 200 years of a united kingdom of Israel, the kingdom splits into two parts: the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom is called Israel. The southern kingdom is called Judah. Eventually, the northern kingdom, Israel, is, I'm looking at Carol because she knows it's coming. Eventually, the northern kingdom is decimated by the, thank you, Assyrians. Yes, the northern kingdom is decimated by the Assyrians, who are still among us even this morning. We've got to be careful. And then about 150 years later, the southern kingdom is also decimated by the Babylonians, 586 BC. So 722, the northern kingdom, 586, the southern kingdom. The southern kingdom, called Judah, is essentially what we know as Israel today in the geopolitical world. But the northern kingdom of Israel pretty much ceased to exist because of the way that the Assyrians took over those conquered territories, and they forced intermarriage. Eventually, in the New Testament, that becomes known as Samaria. Remember the Good Samaritan. Anyways, the northern kingdom, for 200 years, the northern kingdom exists on its own outside of Jerusalem, and there are 19 kings, according to the record of 1 Kings and 2 Kings. There are 19 kings who reign over that northern kingdom called Israel. Do you know how many good kings there were among those 19? 0. That's right. A goose egg. Not even one. And yet, even still, because they are the people of God, God sends to them prophets. Because he loves his people, he sends to them a prophet like Hosea. Coincidentally, Hosea prophesied at about the same time as Isaiah. Hosea and Isaiah were probably contemporaries. Anyways, 200 years of existence, not even one good king among the 19. You might remember such names as Ahab. I mean, these were bad dudes. These northern Israelites, rather than worshiping God, they chose to worship the gods of the Canaanites. Remember the name of the god of the Canaanites? Baal. That's right, Baal. And then there was a female version named Asherah, Baal and Asherah. So they worshipped, in fact, Baal wasn't even a singular. That was as a plural. They worshipped the Baals, multiple Baals. And yet, in spite of their idolatry, God continues to maintain that they belong to him. They belong, the northern kingdom, Israel, belongs to God in the same way that a husband and wife belong to each other in the marriage covenant. Their idolatry is not simply the expression of agency. Hey, this is my life. I get to do what I want, right? It's not simply the expression of freedom of choice. No, in the eyes of God, their departure from God was the equivalent of a married woman seeking sexual relations with someone other than her husband. That language is very explicit in the book of Hosea. And their infidelity is chronic. That comes up so many times through the analogy, of course, of Hosea marrying a prostitute. Anyways, that takes us to the first part of verse 1. Hear the word of the Lord, O children of Israel. Again, speaking to that northern kingdom. For the Lord has a controversy with the inhabitants of the land. You've heard a little bit about that controversy. Our text here is making use of an ancient literary form, a legal document of accusation, very clear parallel with ancient legal documentation, calling witnesses. And here, Israel is called not only as the witness, but also as the defendants in the case. Look at yourselves and see who you've become, God is saying. Take a step back and consider the quality of life that you are living. The second part of verse 1, the Lord says, there is no faithfulness or steadfast love and no knowledge of God in the land. What kind of people have they become? The accusation against them is threefold: no faithfulness, no steadfast love, no knowledge of God. We're going to come back to those three in a moment because I really want to camp out on those. We're going to come back and focus on those three words, but for now, we're going to continue to follow the logic of this indictment against Israel because it will build dimensionality into the reason why this was such a big deal. And it will help us to understand the reason why the quality of your character and my character really does matter. The idea that these positive qualities are missing is amplified by the negative effects that we see in verses 2 and 3. Let's read verse 2. Verse 2 reads, rather than that faithfulness and rather than that covenant love, there is swearing, lying, murder, and committing adultery. They break all bounds, and bloodshed follows bloodshed. 5 words describe the kind of people that they'd become. And it's important for us to understand the portrait that these words present, because we can become accustomed to our own use of language and think that our use of the language is what the biblical writers intended when it's actually not the case. So, for example, the word swearing in the text there is swearing, the text says. That does not refer to saying 4-letter words. Now, don't say 4-letter words this morning just simply because the pastor said that's not in the text. There are other places that will tell you not to use vulgar language. Paul will talk about that. But that's not the idea behind swearing here. Swearing in this text refers to calling down a curse on somebody in the name of God or in the name of your God. It represents the desire for retribution and the desire for revenge, being so hateful towards your enemy that you will align the power of the cosmos. You will align the power of a God, your God, God, against them in your defense. Swearing. In fact, this is something that is prohibited by the 10 Commandments. Many of these are echoes of the 10 Commandments. Swearing, such anger and hatred that you will call the universe against somebody. That's the kind of life that was going on. Lying. The idea behind the word lying here is of dealing falsely with someone to your own benefit. Dealing falsely with someone so that that person suffers, victimizing others through the twisting of words so that you gain an advantage. Murder. This is exactly what it sounds like, but it's also a little bit more. Murder essentially violates the inherent dignity of every person created in the image of God, and every person born, every person conceived has been conceived in the image of God. And you remember, as Jesus taught his disciples, the hatefulness and the insult that lead to murder are just as forbidden among God's people. The next step beyond hatred is murder. And so Jesus says, don't hate your brother in your heart. Stealing. Stealing means using your power or your cunning, your ability to devise a strategy to take what is not yours and thereby deprive somebody of something that is justifiably theirs. You can steal things that are tangible. You can steal things that are intangible. You can, through slander, steal somebody's reputation, even when it is not true. Adultery is breaking the bonds of the marital covenant. Adultery is engaging in sexual intercourse with the spouse of another person. We're all adults here. We can use those words, right? These 5 qualities paint a picture of a world in which everyone does what is right in his or her own eyes in order to get the very best, take advantage, and to hold on to the delusion of power and the desire for pleasure. Got to be honest, this sounds a lot like the world in which we live. the desire to hold on to whatever shred of power that we think that we have so that we can gain an advantage for ourselves. It's fascinating to me how much time we spend studying the psychopathology of sin as if to rationalize sin as something that, well, it kind of makes sense that this person ended up sinning the way that they do. It makes sense that a good-looking Italian guy murdered an insurance man. We rationalize it. You know what I'm talking about? We rationalize it. We psychopathologize sin rather than just calling a spade a spade. People steal because they lack impulse control, they say. People hate because they're insecure. People commit adultery because their needs aren't being met at home. People lie because they've got damaged self-esteem. And how about the effects that these things have on society? So Hosea says that these vicious qualities, I use the word vicious intentionally because the opposite of virtue is vice. These vicious qualities have broken out. They've burst forth. Society has been flipped upside down. We're talking about 3,000 years ago. Society has been flipped upside down, not just out there among the neighbors, but inside, among the people of God, among the people of Israel, and the effects have been catastrophic. Verse 3, therefore the land mourns. The land mourns. We're not talking about people here. We're talking about the earth. And then all who dwell in it languish. In fact, in Hebrew, that is not a pronoun that refers to people. Everything that dwells in the land is languishing. The beasts of the field, the birds of the heaven, and even the fish of the sea are taken away. Note the mourning. Note the languishing exists in three realms. Do you see it in the text? The land, the heavens, and the sea. Can you visualize that? The land, the heavens, and the sea. This tripartite division of the universe is an intentional echo of Genesis chapter 1. When God created the world, God created the heavens and filled them with winged creatures, Genesis chapter 1. When God created the land, he filled it with beasts and livestock, and I love this word, creeping things. Sometimes Lee says, there's a creeping thing on the ceiling. Can you get it? Creeping things. God created the sea and filled it with swarming fish. And at every stage, you remember, God looked back at what he created, and he said to himself, it is good. Hosea's point here in our text, again, we're amplifying the effects of the lack of virtue among God's people. Hosea's point is that every realm of God's good creation has been corrupted by human sin. Maybe you know the name, here's an example, by the way. Maybe you know the name Purdue Pharma. The name ring a bell? Purdue Pharma? Well, you might remember, as we go on with the story here, owned by the Sackler family. In the mid-1990s, they began manufacturing a painkiller called OxyContin. The company advertised the drug as being less addictive than other pain management medications, and they engaged in aggressive and misleading marketing campaigns. And yet, with extremely, extremely high addiction potential, OxyContin quickly became a gateway for those who were addicted to it, a gateway to less expensive alternatives such as heroin and fentanyl. Since the mid-1990s, approximately 1 million people have died from overdoses involving opioids. Meanwhile, the Sackler family has generated over $30 billion in profits just from the sale of that pharmaceutical. Do you hear the corrupting effects of sin? Every sin, whether it's a small one or a big one, every sin has a corrupting effect on our world. Paul's going to say the same thing in Romans chapter 8. There's the reference to Romans 8. Romans 8, Paul says that creation has been in bondage to corruption. And the antidote, according to Paul in Romans chapter 8, is the people of God being made in part now and eventually in full in that day, what Paul calls the glorification of the sons of God, is about God's people becoming the kind of people that they've been called to become. The antidote to the catastrophic effects of sin is found in our transformation, begun by the Spirit of Christ within us now, and ultimately completed when he returns. Again, here's the point. Your godliness matters. Godliness will change both your life and our world. Your life and our world. Going back to the second part of Hosea chapter 4, verse 1, Hosea reduces godliness to three fundamental qualities. Now, you could go to other books of the Bible and probably find other lists, but we're in Hosea, so we're going to make use of his list. And as I've spent, time studying the text on my own, these three qualities have stood out to me as a fitting description of the Christian that I want to be. And before we close, I want to spend a few minutes looking more carefully at these three qualities with an eye on what it would look like to implement these in my life or in your life. Three qualities that I think reflect mature Christian faith. And I'm going to use language here. Wow, that it really is small, isn't it? I'm going to use language here to make it perhaps a bit more palatable, recognizable in our lives. The first word is integrity. The word in our text is faithfulness, but the idea is about more than just loyalty. It's about more than just loyalty, although it at least includes loyalty. Integrity is a life that follows principle rather than expediency. This is a commitment to know the truth and to live by the truth. Now, broadly speaking, there are two different types of integrity, or two different approaches to integrity. There's an internally focused integrity, and there's an externally focused integrity. The internally focused integrity we oftentimes think about as authenticity, being true to yourself. Is that a good thing to be true to yourself? Well, it depends on who you are, right? I'm a murderer at heart, just let me be. No, that's not a good thing. Being true to yourself. This is all about self-authorship, psychological coherence, finding out who you are and then being that person. Your actions are measured against your own sense of rightness. That is an internally focused integrity. And although that's very popular, whether it's in psychology or leadership studies, it's a very popular topic. The second is, I think, a biblical understanding of integrity. It's an externally focused integrity, which is adapting to truth that is outside of you. This is about knowing the truth that is beyond yourself and choosing to conform to it. Who is the author of truth? You? No, God. Knowing the truth that God has decreed and saying, regardless of what I think myself to be, I'm going to conform to his declaration of what is true. Your actions are measured not against your own sense of internal authenticity, but your actions are measured against a standard that is defined by him and that is so far beyond your feelings. Again, Christian understanding of integrity is the latter. From the very beginning of our journey with Christ, from the very, very beginning, our eyes are fixed on Jesus. And according to Paul in Colossians, we are being remade day after day into the image of Christ. So we are being molded and made after his image. And so that's what integrity looks like for the Christian. Integrity is the extent to which my life conforms to the image of Christ. And so the question for me here, now this is my question for me, and I hope that it's relevant for you too. The question is, in what area of my life, or what areas of my life are out of shape? In what areas is my life out of shape? The shape being determined by the image of Christ. In what areas do I need to be transformed into the image of Christ? What a great question to be asking yourself every day, but especially as we turn the calendar into a new year, to be asking yourself the question, what are some of those areas in my life where I need to conform not to my inner sense of authenticity, but to the character of God as revealed in the person of Christ? That's the first quality. The second quality in our text we're going to call compassion. And if you are familiar with the word steadfast love, you might have expected something different. That word steadfast love in Hebrew is chesed. That's a fun one to say because it kind of gets the back of your throat. Chesed. Chesed is a beautiful word, but we're going to use the word compassion here. The idea is about so much more than just fulfilling duty. It means consistently doing good for another person based upon the previous commitment to love. You see, there are relationships in which we exist, and chesed is about more than just being dutiful. It is about going beyond legal obligation. It entails the free expression of kindness and goodness to those with whom you are in a relationship. In marriage, this means going beyond the simple requirements, the simple duties, to show real kindness to your spouse. In community, we're bound together in community here in this church, right? In community or in your neighborhood or with your children. This means being compassionate to another person, even if that person is a stranger or even if that person's a little annoying at times. Now, the opposite of this compassionate living is cruel and self-centered. And again, our text is showing us what the world looks like when self-centeredness and cruelty, or just bottom line fulfillment of duty only, is the way that we live those relationships. The question for reflection here is, what would it look like for me to be kinder in my relationships? Kinder with my wife, kinder with my children, kinder on the job, kinder in my community. What would it look like for me to be more compassionate in those relationships in which I already have a commitment? Maybe that question is relevant for you as well. Remember, by embracing these qualities, the impact is not just for you. It's for everybody and everything around you. When you become a kinder person, guess what? Even the dog that lives in your house benefits from that. Not that we have any dogs that test our patience in our house. Just saying. Number 3, the third quality, the knowledge of God. The knowledge of God. Straightforward enough, but clearly underappreciated. The knowledge of God is the beginning of wisdom, the Proverbs tells us. The knowledge of God is the beginning of wisdom. And the knowledge of God has both an objective and a subjective component to it. Objective knowledge of God entails believing the right thing about God, having good doctrine, being able to differentiate the true God from the panoply of false gods that exist out there in the universe. How many gods are there? One. How many true gods are there? There's one. How many false gods are there? I mean, as many people as there are probably that same number of false gods. So clarity about the nature and the character and the knowledge, the objective clarity about that God, that is the knowledge of God. We might say that we stumble into sin when we misunderstand who God is. So we need to know about him. And yet the subjective knowledge of God is beyond the knowledge about him. It is the knowledge of being with him. According to James, even demons have good theology. If the demons were to take a Scantron test on the character of God, they probably would beat you. They probably would do better at Bible trivia than you and me. But the subjective knowledge of God comes from living in a place of daily surrender and dependence on him, of being committed to a growing relationship with him, day by day by day. Again, the question for reflection for me, maybe for you too, hopefully, What is my next step forward in the knowledge of God? What is my next step forward in knowing God? Either objectively or subjectively or both. Again, bringing this to a close, what kind of person are you becoming? What kind of person are you becoming? 3 qualities in our text stand out as a great set of resolutions for the new year. I want to be a man of integrity, willingly presenting the out-of-shape areas of my life to God to be transformed into the image of Christ. Second, I want to be a man of compassion, expressing kindness and doing good to those that I love, even when those relationships might be challenging. Third, I want to be a man who knows God. Yes, I want to grow in clarity of doctrine, good doctrine, clear doctrine, but also a growing relationship with God in which I trust him more this year than I did last year. I want to love him with more faith and better faith than last year. Here's my ask for you. I'm specifically asking you, if you have not done this yet this year, to carve out 30 uninterrupted minutes. 30 uninterrupted minutes by yourself when you can reflect on how you might adopt these kinds of qualities into your life this year. What kind of person are you becoming? Some of you might have small kids at home, and 30 minutes sounds like a long time to stay in the bathroom. Just tell your spouse you're going out for a cup of coffee. Trust me, your spouse gets a better person back from your reflecting on these things. Your spouse gets a better person. Your dog gets a better person. Your kids get a better person. Your workplace coworkers get a better person because you spend the time contemplating the kind of person that God is calling you to be. Godliness will change both your world, or your life, and our world. Have you ever seen a papaya tree in real life? I know you've seen a papaya. Some of you have lived with papaya trees. I like papayas. They're great. I like the pink ones better than the other ones, but they're amazing. Papaya trees grow really, really fast, right? They can grow 20 feet tall in like 6 months if you get a good rainfall. A papaya tree grows fast and tall. They have an unbranched trunk topped by large herbaceous leaves, dense clusters of fruit at the very, very top. A papaya tree, again, can grow 10 to 20 feet in only a few months and produce fruit very quickly. And yet, do you know what's interesting about a papaya tree? It's hollow on the inside. In fact, they don't even call it a tree, they call it a plant because it's hollow on the inside. A strong wind, a raging storm can pull down a papaya tree first, quickly, rendering its growth absolutely worthless because it's hollow on the inside. Because it lacks inner substance. It cannot withstand the storm. Does your life have inner substance? What kind of person are you becoming? Why not make 2026 a year of substance? A year of growing in godliness. Because godliness will change your life and our world. Gracious Heavenly Father, we commit to you this year that is in front of us, 2026. As individuals and as families and as households and as a church, would you draw us forward on this journey with Christ, that we might be transformed in the image of Christ, so that you might be glorified, and so that our world would be made right through the kind of life that you've called us to live. God, give us eyes to live by faith, eyes to see the things that maybe we don't see with our physical eyes, but by faith that we might walk more closely with you and trust you, regardless of what comes this year, God. In the middle of all that comes, would you help us to maintain this commitment to be the kind of people that bring change in every area of our lives, positive change, as we trust you in Jesus' name. Amen.